Welcome to the Exodus and Beyond. I'm your host, author R.J. von-Bruening. In this video series, we'll be exploring the Exodus from an esoteric understanding as explored in my book, The Exodus and Beyond, Book 2 of Unlocking the Dream Vision. In this video, we'll be exploring one last mystery. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit the like button below and subscribe for future videos. This series presents information based in part upon theory and conjecture of the system of esoteric symbolism. The purpose is to suggest some possible interpretation, but not necessarily the only one to the many mysteries we will explore. As we have discovered on our journey through the Exodus and beyond, the mystery of the great dark age that befell humanity that started with the collapse of the Bronze Age civilization was due to the second phase of the Exodus under the leadership of the divine twin brothers. Over time, the once great Bronze Age civilizations were slowly replaced with a simple agricultural-based society ruled over by a very small group of primarily illiterate tribal elites. These new elite rulers were broken into two different but equally powerful classes, with one being a warrior class led by a king, while the other was a priesthood led by a high priest. Both classes of rulers claimed to be the direct descendants of the original leaders of the tribes and during the time of the Exodus. These rulers also imposed a new religion with a new pantheon of gods upon the local populations they conquered. A religion that preached a strict belief of absolute devotion to the will of the gods that was based upon a new polytheistic religion that was often fused with the existing local traditions, customs, and rituals, so much so that it created entirely new cultures. We have learned a great deal about how these societies of this great dark age were structured and why and how the art of writing was lost, amongst other things. Yet we still have next to no understanding of the people who composed this new elite class that ruled over this mostly rural population of agricultural workers. Although there is scant knowledge about these elite rulers, there are numerous clues that can be found when we realize that this time was not a complete dark age as is so often believed and presented within the history books. It was a time that was very much like the Catholic Church of the Middle Ages, with the aid of local rulers, and that had complete and total domination over all phases of medieval European society, often ruling with an iron fist. It was a time when religion dominated all levels of government, economics, and society from birth to the grave. As with medieval Europe, even though it was a time deeply influenced and controlled by religion, it was also a time where we see the flowering and the building of vast temple complexes dedicated to the gods. These massive religious complexes were fused with incredible artwork that recounted the extraordinary tale of the Exodus and the founding of these societies written in stone. These sites tended to become the new centers of social interaction for the native populations, and in time these sites also became the de facto power centers from which the new elites ruled from. Within these ancient temple complexes, we find our first clues that help us to identify these new elites and their claims to rule. In all of them, we find the same story. A story of how their right to rule comes directly from the gods, commonly known in the Western world as the divine right of kings. We also find that these elites are connected in some manner to the divine twin brothers within the various mythologies. It appears very common for the twin brothers to slowly transform into gods or semi-divine beings directly connected to the gods as the centuries went by. Incredibly, as the twin brothers slowly transformed into legend, the original land claims that are remembered in the Bible and that were the actual reason for the second phase of the Exodus seem to have been lost or disappear in the process. It is unknown why these original claims were lost, but this missing information is crucial to understanding how the various ancient civilizations were all at one time all connected through culture, religion, mythology, symbolism, and architecture. While much of the information from this period has been all but lost, destroyed, obscured, or in most cases just not recorded, There is an essential clue from a most unlikely source that will provide us with a small glimpse into this lost time period and the mysterious men and women who ruled over it. Not only will this clue help us identify who these elite rulers were, but it will also allow us to answer one of the greatest mysteries and enigmas of the ancient world, the worldwide phenomenon of individuals with elongated skulls, and why modern scholars go to such great lengths to ignore them and debunk them. At first, it might seem a bit strange that these oddly shaped skulls could have anything to do with our journey into the Exodus or the legendary divine twin brothers. Nevertheless, we will soon learn how these mysterious people with their strangely shaped skulls are far more important than any have ever imagined before. We will also discover how they were the key to understanding who the elite rulers were during this great dark age. To understand how these elongated skull people fit into the story, we must first explore what little we know about these people from modern science. According to modern scholars and archaeologists, all elongated skulls are always rationalized as being a form of head binding or artificial cranial deformation. This practice of identifying all elongated skulls as the results of intentional artificial cranial deformation began in the first half of the 19th century to explain these unusual skulls that were discovered in Peru, South America, and southeastern Europe, and in the Crimean. Since the early 19th century to the present, individuals with elongated skulls have been found all around the world. Remarkably, there is ample evidence that destroys the scientific argument that all elongated skulls are exclusively the product of artificial cranial deformation through head binding. This is simply because since 1852 there have been numerous fetuses with elongated skulls found in utero. This strongly suggests that these individuals were not fully human or Homo sapiens sapien. Besides, there are numerous elongated skulls of young infants under the age of 1 year of age that indicate no external artificial pressure was induced upon their skulls. What's even more remarkable, such knowledge was readily available to European researchers as early as 1838. There has also been numerous mummies found in Peru that contain fetuses with elongated skulls in utero since the two original specimens were found in the mid-1800s. Furthermore, there appears to have been hundreds of infants and very young children with elongated skulls that were far too young for such a suggested head binding to have an effect, with no signs of external pressure ever being applied to the skulls, and these skulls have been found all around the world. Much more recently, Brian Forrester of Hidden Inca Tours has been able to obtain and test DNA taken from several different elongated skulls from the Paracas area of Peru, South America. In the first round of testing, mitochondrial DNA was recovered from one of the skulls, and the results that were obtained were highly controversial. The DNA showed that the individual was a hybrid of some type, with its mother being human, a Homo sapien, but the father was not able to be identified. A significant number of people concluded that the unknown father was of extraterrestrial origin. However, it is much more likely that the father is not some alien, but rather one of the unidentified closely related hominids we know existed at the time. The next controversial finding was that it appeared highly unlikely that this individual would have been able to interbreed with humans and could only breed with other hybrids like themselves. Even then, it appears that mating may have proven very difficult and highly dangerous for the mother. In addition to these results, it was discovered that several of the skulls from the Paracas region of South America had genetic markers that have only been found in Middle Eastern populations and not in South America. At first glance, these results may seem to be initially of lesser importance and attributed to various other factors that are easily dismissed. Nevertheless, as we will now begin to understand, these controversial results are pivotal to understanding who these people were and why they are ignored. To better understand who these unidentified hominids were, we must first turn to what may seem an unusual but familiar place of folklore and fairy tales. The critical narrative that we need to focus on is the folklore that, regardless of the story being told, persons of royalty have always been distinctively recognizable to the everyday person, even if they were in disguise. This common belief is almost universally known and is still widely used within modern storytelling. What is truly remarkable is the fact that not one of these ancient myths, legends, folklore, or fairy tale tells us why royalty was always so recognizable to the commoner. We tend to fill in these little blanks with the idea that perhaps it was their behavior and the fact that they had been waited on hand and foot all their life, and with absolutely no need to correlate it with their physical appearance. If we assume that it was because of their appearance and not their behavior, as it's traditionally been done, it becomes incredibly easy to understand that an individual with an elongated skull would find it next to impossible to hide and would be instantly recognizable to a commoner. Almost every individual with an elongated skull found outside of Paracas, Peru, tends to be of a royal burial. The few that are not royal are clearly of high-ranking elites who appear to be some type of religious leader or great warrior who had somehow earned the right to be buried with royal-like trappings. If we combine this idea of their appearance with the traditional ideas and customs regarding royalty, along with the controversial DNA testing, we can figure out for the first time who these elongated skull people were and how they fit into this story. Our first step is to realize that these elongated skull people were most likely royalty. Once we understand that, we can then understand many of the ancient customs that are still used in royalty to this day. The first being the universal tradition that royalty can only marry other royals. It has been traditionally believed that this was the primary reason for this was because of family lines of inheritance for wealth, political power, and land. However, when we consider the DNA evidence from the elongated skulls and that these people could not breed with normal human beings or any other closely related hominid that was alive at the time, we can quickly understand that the ancient custom of royalty only marrying other royalty was simply because they could not successfully breed with commoners and produce children that could inherit their power, their standing, and their lands. This understanding that the ruling class of these ancient societies was composed of these elongated skull people with their limited ability to mate and produce offspring, we can begin explaining the mystery of why the original members of the tribes of Israel under Moses and Aaron were forbidden to marry foreign wives or husbands. In chapter 7 of the book of Deuteronomy, we are told that not only are the Israelites forbidden to marry outside of the tribes, but we're also told that these tribes of Israel were the fewest of all people. The entire mystery quickly melts away with the realization that the elites, if not the members of the tribes of Israel, were primarily composed of these elongated skull people. They would have been a very distinct class of people that formed the backbone of the government and religious classes of rulers that could only mate with others like themselves. These chosen ones become the new kings and priests of the societies they took over during the second phase of the Exodus. Their elongated skulls are what singled them out as being different or divine from the regular commoner. According to the Bible, not only were the Israelites the fewest of people, but they were also supposedly considered the chosen ones that were a holy people. If we consider that in the ancient world, government and religion tended to be one and the same thing, we can easily imagine how a small group of people with elongated skulls that initially formed the upper leadership of the tribes would in time come to dominate all the elite classes of society. Since it is the general rule that the ancient texts only recorded the actions of society's elites and very seldom ever the problems or concerns of the lower classes. We can then understand that these people would view themselves as the chosen ones because they were different, ordained by the gods to be a holy people, leading the great unwashed masses to the proper service and devotion to the gods. Unfortunately, we have next to no evidence or records on how these chosen leaders actually ruled. Nevertheless, based on biblical tradition, mythology, ancient folklore, we can speculate with some confidence that it was a harsh and also often brutal rule where their word was unquestionable law. A time when any member of the lower classes could be killed as punishment for the smallest of infractions. We were also provided an important clue that their rule was unkind once the first temple was destroyed and the lower classes began to overthrow them. Because not only did the common people overthrow these elites, but they went to great lengths to do everything they can to erase the traces and the memory of these leaders and these people. The best known example of this erasing of the leaders or the rulers is the ever famous heretic pharaoh known as Akhenaten. Once Akhenaten had died, the ancient Egyptians went to great lengths to remove any and all traces of him from existence. His temples were destroyed, with the material being used to construct new temples to the old gods. All records that contain his name were changed or completely rewritten to remove any reference to him, with all engravings, carvings, or statues of him destroyed or buried, thereby erasing him from memory and from history, as if he never existed, while also denying him an afterlife in the process. As seen in the few surviving statues and carvings of Akhenaten along with his wife and children, he had an elongated skull. This allows us to realize that it is most likely that Akhenaten was the first attempt to place a chosen one in power in Egypt. However, as we know, the Egyptians ultimately rejected Akhenaten's rule and his religious teachings. Although the Egyptians rejected Akhenaten, it is evident that many of the events surrounding the second phase of the Exodus and the Divine Twin Brothers stories do become incorporated into Egyptian thought, society, and religious belief. It is unknown how this happened, but it is highly probable that it occurred after the Sea Peoples arrived and conquered the other Bronze Age civilizations around the Mediterranean, as these invaders established new civilizations and societies. The Egyptians had to deal with these new societies through trade. Eventually, as the centuries went along, the Egyptians just naturally began to incorporate these new people's stories into their society and culture. During this long process, they also changed the stories into something more uniquely Egyptian, very similar to what we saw happen to the stories, customs, and rituals in China and Japan. By understanding who these elongated people were, we can easily understand why modern scholars and archaeologists would go to such great lengths to either ignore or debunk these people. It is merely because sooner or later this connection would be made to the legendary Divine Twin Brothers and the second phase of the Great Exodus out of Egypt by the Indo-European speaking children of Israel. Once this connection is made, the next step is to realize that these people are the elite ruling class of ancient people known as the Hebrews that we later call the Israelites. This realization also helps explain why these people were so hated and looked upon with such disdain within the classical ancient world. They were a reminder of the great dark age where the average person was a little bit more than a slave to the gods and at the mercy of their divine wrath. Additionally, we can also realize that the later followers of Judaism, commonly known as the Jews, had little or no connection to the original Israelites and were primarily viewed as heretics by most people. This then brings us to the next logical question, which of course was, did the elongated skull people have any special powers? Unfortunately, according to the ancient sources, these people do not appear to have any extraordinary mental powers. The only thing that appears to make these people any different than the average human being is they seem to have some ability to communicate directly with the gods through dreams and visions. The myths also refer to many of these individuals of having some type of unique healing ability. Nevertheless, it should be noted that these stories tend to be so vague that it's just as equally possible that they did not have any kind of special healing powers, but they were just slightly more intelligent than the average person of the time and would just apply basic medical care, so it appeared that they had healing abilities. Additionally, there's a large number of these individuals that become known as soothsayers, seers, magicians, prophets, and shaman who fill the royal courts and in time become the advisors to kings and queens. There are numerous stories within the Bible that speak of these individuals' importance in consulting or advising the king or queen of different kingdoms. According to the Bible and historically with the Medes, these individuals normally come from one tribe of people. One of the best known of these ancient biblical stories related to soothsayers and seers is the story of Joseph being sold into slavery by his 11 brothers and later becoming an advisor to Pharaoh through his ability to interpret the meaning of dreams as told in the book of Genesis. As we already know, the entire Jacob and Esau story is related to the creation of the first Cro-Magnon and the legendary hairy man of mythology. As we'll now learn, this story of Joseph is much like his father's story, and that it is the creation story of this new class of elite rulers that have elongated skulls. One of the great mysteries of this story is why Joseph stands out from his 11 brothers and why his father Jacob cared more for him than his brothers. The reason that is given in Genesis is, now Israel, Jacob, loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And his brethren saw that their father loved him more than his brethren. They hated him, and could not speak peacefully unto him. Genesis 37, verse 3 and 4. Although the true meaning of the coat of many colors is unknown, it is traditionally viewed as a unique tunic or robe representing a special relationship or favor. It is also commonly believed by many that it was a robe that extended to the feet with long sleeves and was richly ordained with gold threading and possibly with gemstones sewn into it. These ideas of what the coat of many colors is a remarkably good description of the common idea and traditional robe believed to have been worn by wizards or magicians in modern pop culture. As we already know, modern-day wizards are also known by many names, as mage, warlock, witch, sorcerer, or spellcaster being some of the more common ones. They're commonly based upon the thought of an old wise man who practiced magic, who typically acts as a mentor, with Merlin from King Arthur's saga being a good example of this. Although in our modern world, wizards or magicians, as they are known to the ancients, are thought of being primarily the world of fantasy, with them being either good or evil. Nevertheless, the magicians that appear in myth, folklore, and even the Bible are not always so clearly labeled as good or evil. In most traditions, they tend to be unpredictable and of uncertain character, with them being neither good or evil, and their treatment of other people usually depending on the way they were treated. One of the most common examples of this is the tales that speak of a person meeting an old woman or man and not realizing that they were dealing with a witch or magician. In most cases, the witch or magician will reward kindness and punish rudeness. Although these ancient magicians tended to be neither good or evil, they were commonly believed to be in possession of the skills of interpreting the meaning of dreams in the hope of foretelling future events. According to the Bible, all these qualities was possessed by Joseph. In the story of Joseph, we are told that Pharaoh had two distinct dreams. In the first, he saw 7 fat cows that devoured 7 lean cows. In the second dream, he saw 7 withered ears of corn devour 7 fat ears of corn. When all of Pharaoh's magicians, wise men, soothsayers, seers, and prophets had failed in their attempts to interpret his dreams, Pharaoh's chief butler, who had been imprisoned with Joseph, told him of Joseph's ability to interpret dreams. Pharaoh then summoned Joseph, who then interpreted his dreams as meaning that in the land of Egypt there would be 7 years of abundance, and that would be followed by 7 years of famine. Joseph then advised Pharaoh to store surplus corn during the years of abundance to weather the years of famine and save the people of Egypt. Pharaoh takes Joseph's advice, and after these events unfold, Joseph is given great political power in Pharaoh's court. With our new esoteric knowledge, it isn't much of a leap to understand and realize that it is highly probable that Joseph, along with his full brother, Benjamin, are the first of these elongated skull people. Whereas the tribe of Benjamin will provide Israel's first king, there is no tribe named for Joseph. In this ancient setting, and although the Bible provides a slightly different chain of events, it strongly supports that Joseph was the first head priest of these people. It was also very common in this ancient time that individuals of the priesthood normally would not be allowed to own land or wealth, and would have also not been allowed to have a title or tribal name. Hence, this could explain why no tribal name was given to Joseph. It also explains why an imprisoned slave could have been allowed to interpret Pharaoh's dreams. It is also easy to imagine that if Joseph had an elongated skull, the Egyptians and also his brothers would have looked upon him as being different and possibly even touched by the gods themselves. In time, Joseph's brothers and his father Jacob joined him in Egypt after he attained a high standing within Pharaoh's court. In time, and primarily because Joseph, his brothers become an elite class of rulers and religious leaders of the tribes of Israel. Although there is little evidence, it's easy to imagine how their physical appearance of an elongated skull would have set them apart from the average Egyptian. It also helps explain the mystery as to why the Egyptians would have allowed foreigners to settle on their lands, and why these Israelites were viewed as being so different from the Egyptian people. This knowledge also helps explain how and why the heretic pharaoh Akhenaten came to power, even though he was not the firstborn of Pharaoh. It may have been because of his physical appearance of being like Joseph and the other elite rulers of the tribe of Israel, whose God had devastated the land of Egypt and led them on their great exodus as spoken of in the Bible and the dream vision of Enoch. This then again brings us back to the idea that their rule was brutal and cruel for the average person, and why they were wiped from history once their grip on power began failing. Remarkably, this information destroys the currently accepted mythology and historical timeline put forward by scholars and archaeologists. However, it provides another critical connection back to the mighty gods that our ancient ancestors worshipped and modern-day UFO lore. As we learned with Ishu being the legendary hairy man of legend that is more commonly known as Bigfoot or Sasquatch today, modern UFO lore is filled with stories of aliens that appear to be human in appearance but with elongated skulls. This allows us to understand that these elongated skull people also survived the Great Destruction and the Transformation, and still must be in service to these so-called gods. This is another example of the deception that these so-called gods perpetrate upon humanity to make people think they are aliens from another planetary system and not originally from Earth. It also helps obscure the fact that these creatures utterly destroyed their civilization over 12,000 years ago. We must also consider another connection when thinking about modern UFO lore and the ancient world. This connection is the modern idea of a deep underground military bases, commonly referred to as DUMBs. According to the claims, an unknown number of alleged underground bases have been built and are currently occupied by these so-called aliens. It is also claimed that a small group of human allies is aiding them. Unfortunately, outside of the many claims, there is little to no available evidence that such bases exist, and many believe that they are hoaxes and or misinformation. Although that may or may not be true, there is no denying that numerous governments of the world have built an unknown number of underground military bases, with the United States Air Force Cheyenne Mountain Complex, located under Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado near the city of Colorado Springs, possibly being the most famous of these underground bases. What is truly remarkable is that within this modern-day UFO lore, there are numerous claims that the same horrific things that our ancient ancestors described as happening in the underworld are still occurring to this very day on these alleged bases. Many of these accounts claim that gruesome human and medical and genetic experimentations are being performed by non-human hands. If we take these claims and combine them with the general idea that these creatures may have used us humans, our ancient ancestors, as a food source, then these claims become eerily similar to the ancient accounts of a hell-like underworld, all of which leaves us to wonder if there's not more truth to these claims, and that some remnant of the underworld may still exist somewhere within the deep bowels of the earth. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit the like button below and subscribe for future videos.